This better.
Okay.
That holds at least.
Let's take a moment. Just allow your eyes to close for a moment. Let's all ensure that we really arrive. Our bodies are here. But in the freneticness and the hecticness of travel and planning, implementing, it's easy to forget to actually arrive. So take a moment. And just allow yourself with a long and deep inhalation and a long and deep exhalation. Allow that reconnection between the awareness and the breath. Just come back to yourself. Back to yourself. The mind will jump around. Inevitably, there are things left undone, things you forgot, things you want to remember, things that aren't exactly as you would like them to be, things that are better than you ever imagined they could be. And the mind just jumps around. But the moment you notice that the mind is jumping, just draw the awareness back to the breath. Just pull the awareness away from the jumpiness of the mind. Don't try to fight the mind. Jumping is its nature. But just draw the awareness away from the jumpiness of the mind into the depth of your breath. As the inhalations and exhalations get longer and deeper. And as they flow in a continuous ebb and flow like the waves of the ocean, allow yourself to drop down. Drop down into the eternal perfection. Not perfect because we've just made it perfect, but perfect because it's never been anything other than perfect. Allow yourself just to drop into the breath as it deepens and as it slows. And just allow yourself to become aware that there's nothing to do right now, nowhere to be, just here. Right here in this breath. As you inhale the perfection of the universe into yourself, and exhale the perfection of the self back into the universe. Slowly and gently, bring the palms of your hands together at chest level and rub them gently against each other. Place the cupped palms of your hands over your closed eyes. Slowly and gently, open the eyes into the palms of your hand and lower the hands. So beautiful to be together, and especially to be together at this time, this sacred time of Guru Purnima. It's a celebration of light, but not just any light, it's a celebration of the light of the Guru, that spiritual divine light that shows us who we are. And it's always beautiful to gather at Guru Purnima, but it's especially beautiful this year after the last 2.5 years of the pandemic. It's been really a time of darkness. Darkness of illness and death, darkness of fear, darkness of loss, darkness of othering that seems to be tragically growing. And it's not, of course, only the pandemic. There's so much else going on in our world today, from wars in other countries to wars here, not the same type of war we're seeing in Ukraine, but wars between people, different races, religions, political parties, way of thinking, color of skin. And in this time, there's been so much uncertainty. And it's been interesting because there's always uncertainty. I mean, it's not like before COVID, life was somehow certain, that we somehow had some kind of guarantee on our health or our life or our bank account. And yet COVID just really brought that home so deeply of, wow, it's not in our hands. I remember when it first hit, March of 2020, we were like, okay, so, well, by the summer, we'll be seeing you in America. Everybody thought it was going to be a few weeks. Then it was going to be a few months. Then it was going to be a year. Then it would be over when the vaccines came out. Then it would be, then it would be, then it would be. And it's been a really powerful indication of the uncertainty. And in that uncertainty is fear. The uncertainty will never go away. It's the nature of the universe. It's the nature of, guess what? We're not in charge. But what's critical and what we'll talk about over these days is, well, how do we, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of loss, in the face of illness, in the face of death, in the face of stock market collapses, in the face of war, in the face of political leaders and others making decisions that we really don't agree with, in the face of increasing violence, in the face of divisions, how do we live in light? And that's why we gave the name of emerging into light. Well, on the one hand, emerging as in quite literally from our rooms and our homes and the darkness of, artificial light locked into your homes. But on a much deeper level, emerging into that light of who we are. And it's not about pushing away the darkness or denying the darkness. It's not about pretending that these problems aren't there, but it's about recognizing that in the face of all of that, there is a self that isn't wrapped up in that. There's a self, as Bhagavan Krishna gives so beautifully, clearly, succinctly in the Bhagavad Gita, that cannot be burned by fire, cut with knives, wet with water, dried by the wind, doesn't die, isn't born, isn't its bank account, isn't any of these things, isn't its size or shape or color or race or religion, political party, history, none of that. But how do we emerge into that light, into that awareness? Because the light that a guru shines on us is the light of our self. That's the light that the guru shines. When we say the guru removes the darkness and brings the light, it's that darkness of our ignorance, of how we identify, of what we get stuck in. And then that light of actually who we really are. that of course has nothing to do with the form, has nothing to do with the role, and everything to do with the content. But these days, I mean, again, it was true long before COVID. There's a reason that in our scriptures they talk about the monkey mind. Mobile phones did not invent it. We were distracted long before we had social media. And yet, with what's happened over the last few years, coupled with our growing dependence on not just the devices themselves, but the information we get from them. So suddenly, WhatsApp is our source of news. And not only is it fake most of the time, but it's constant. And so we're in a situation these days where A, we are afraid for our health, for our life, for our jobs, for our economy, for our world, for the environment. But we're also in a place where our minds are all over the place. Everyone you talk to, the biggest complaint everyone has these days: I can't concentrate, I can't think, my mind is all over the place, I can't meditate. And what's happening is, number one, we're living in this field of stress. Even if you are not someone who personally is afraid of COVID, or afraid of losing your job, or afraid of losing a loved one, or afraid of monkeypox, or whatever it may be today, even if you're not personally afraid of that, the energetic field that we now live in is one of stress. Whether you are or you are not deeply and ardently on one or the other side of political issues, of Supreme Court decisions, of political parties, regardless of any of that from your personal life, there is a field, the energetic field in the world today is stress. And our minds have been co-opted, hijacked into that field. And so as we are identifying as the physical body that's terrified of being sick, of dying, as we are identified as the holders of our jobs, the holders of our bank accounts, terrified of what's happening to the economy, or as we are the ones who are just constantly being overwhelmed with information of fear, of hate, of divisiveness. Every single time we look at our phone or look at our computer, our minds are not in our hands. And aside from the obvious dilemma of this, which means we're scattered and distracted and suffering and bringing suffering to others, aside from that, our minds are the key to our lives. We cannot actually make changes in our life without the engagement of our minds. Your minds made a decision to come on this retreat. Your minds made a decision to come into satsang. Your minds are making decisions to get up in the morning and take the yoga class. Your mind is the one that says, yeah, I could have, spent these days in a bar drinking, but instead, I have a better idea. I'm going to do something different. Yeah, you could have spent these days just sitting in front of CNN getting more and more miserable, or whatever channel you prefer. but you decided, I have a better idea. That's the mind. So the mind gets a really bad rap, but actually it's a tool in our hands. But that's the key. It has to be in our hands so that it can be put to use for our highest goal. You may have a highest goal of enlightenment, awakening, spiritual, divine connection, or even just living in peace, living in joy, finding the way, living in love. But if your mind is not able to be a tool in service of that, well, who's gonna get you on retreats? Who's gonna book your flights to Rishikesh? Who's gonna get you off Facebook? Who's gonna make those decisions for you? Who's gonna make that happen? Well, it's the mind. And so this is where, over the next few days, we're gonna really focus on how do we remove this darkness that is covering our minds. When we speak about Guru Purnima, or we speak about the Guru and the darkness that the Guru removes from us, or even when we look in our mantras and our prayers and we chant Asatoma, Sadgamaya, Thamsoma, Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma, Amritam Gamaya, that darkness, it's this darkness of ignorance. And it's always been spoken about as just a core fundamental darkness of not knowing who we are, which it is. And these days, again, I keep saying these days when of course we've got scriptures telling us the same thing from thousands and thousands of years ago, but it does seem to be heightening over the days, the weeks, the months, the years, is the ability of us to recognize that there is darkness, that we are living in ignorance. And it's not just the fake news that we're consuming, but it's the identification as the one who is reacting to the fake news. Or real news. So we see something and we become angry or we become judgmental. And I don't only mean that which comes by WhatsApp or online. It's happening in all of our lives around us, in our families, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces. Something happens. We see it, we hear it. We become angry, we become judgmental, we become negative, we become jealous, we have grudges, we have resentment. And we identify as the one who is angry. We identify as the one who is afraid. We identify as the one holding this grudge, as the one who is opposed to that, as the one who's on the side of that. That's the other dilemma with all of this divisiveness and these lines and the othering, is on the one hand it's separating us from others, which itself is tragic and critical. But on the other hand, it is strengthening that false identity. Each of us is getting more and more identified as the one who thinks this, believes that, votes like this, prays like that, loves like this. And so our own internal sense of self, false self, is actually getting hardened and hardened and hardened as we are simultaneously pushing each other away. So it's this double bind. And this is where that light is so critical. That light of who we really are. Who is that self? I want to do just a little experience for a moment. Just close your eyes. It's easier to experience it than to just hear it. So think in your mind about a moment. It could be recent, it could be 50 years ago, when you were really, really happy, deeply, fully joyful. Just hold that moment in your awareness. Now think about a moment, again, it could be 20 minutes ago, it could be decades ago, in which you were really, really angry. Try to hold that moment really clear in your mind. Now think of another moment when you were really, really happy and joyful. Not the same one you used before, a different one. Now think of a moment when you were really, really afraid. Could be a physical threat, could be mental, an exam or something. Sometime when you were really, really, really afraid. Now think of a moment when you were so in love. Could be romantic love, doesn't have to be. Could be mother and child. Could be friend. Could be with a tree. But a moment that you were so in love that you just lost all sense of where you ended and that other being began. Okay, now open your eyes. Now, who was the self that experienced all of those? Right? As you pulled each memory up, each experience up, who was the self that was consistent through that? I mean, there's a you that was remembering when you were really angry, that remembers when you're really happy, that remembers when you're in love, that remembers when you're afraid. What's that self? Well, clearly the self isn't angry or fearful or happy even, because we all could change that. right? I mean, when it happened the first time, it might have lasted longer than 15 seconds, but by now it's over. You've had God knows how many other different experiences. So these emotional moments, emotional states, are like waves of the ocean. They come and they go. And the question for us is, well, who is the self that is aware? I mean, you pulled up a moment of anger. I assume that was pretty easy to do. I mean, I assume that all of these moments were easy to find. So there is a self that is aware. Oh, I was angry in that moment, right? The anger is gone. Think about this for a moment, because it's really important and it's really deep in your understanding of self. The anger itself is gone, and yet the awareness that you were angry is still there because you were able to pull up the memory. The happiness from that moment is gone, but the awareness that there was happiness is still there because you were able to pull it up. So, who is that that's aware? I mean, I didn't give you 2 hours to rack your brains and go back through your journals and, scroll your Facebook feed to look for when you might have been angry or happy. I mean, you were given just a few seconds. But the awareness knew, oh, that was a moment of anger, that was a moment of joy, that was a moment of fear. So who's aware? Who is that? That is right here with you now, aware, and was with you then, aware, is with you in your anger, aware, is with you in your joy, aware, is with you in your fear, aware, is with you in love, aware. Who is that? That experience of self that never changes. When we speak about the self being unchanging, this is what we mean. I mean, clearly the body keeps changing. That of which I am aware keeps changing. I'm aware that I'm eating. I'm aware that I'm hot. I'm aware that I'm cold. I'm aware that I'm walking. But the awareness, the one who is aware, doesn't change. It's like if I'm looking at you and you first hold up 3 fingers and I say 3, and then you hold up 2 fingers and I say 2, and then you hold up both hands and I say 10. Well, what I'm looking at keeps changing. But my eyes that are looking are the same. It's just that what I'm looking at keeps changing. And the self is experiencing this incarnation in all of its beautiful experiences. It's there with you. It's not like when you get angry, the self says, forget it. This wasn't part of my package deal. I didn't incarnate to experience anger. Forget it. And the soul just leaves your body. Doesn't happen. Whatever experience you're going through, the self is there, aware. We're just not able to tap into it when we are in the throes of anger or fear or stress. But it's there because if I say to you later on, do you remember that moment? You'll say, oh yeah, I was really angry. So you were there, you were aware. And just as you begin to go through the minutes of your evening, of tomorrow morning, it's a beautiful practice to just see whether you can shift from being the one in the experience, lost in the experience. And there's something to be said, by the way, for being lost in some experiences as well. But for now, as we're finding and anchoring and grounding and connecting to that self, as you go through the rest of the evening and the morning, just see whether you can shift from the one who is in the throes of whatever you're doing to the one who is aware that doing is happening. The one who is aware. You're not disconnected from it. You're fully there with full awareness. And just see what it would be like to not be the one who is angry, or the one who is sad, or the one who is judgmental, or the one who is jealous, or even the one who is happy. What would it be like not to be that one, but to be the one, aware of, ever present, aware that, happiness is happening. Because what that does is it gives us a window in, just a window in to that presence of that which doesn't change. The presence of that isn't up and down on the waves. Because this is a time, and we'll talk a lot about this over the next few days, this is a time when we need our minds to be in our hands. I don't mean enslaving them, subjugating them, fighting with them, but they need to be in our hands as a tool, not that which is running away from us. Because that's when we start to lose ourselves, and it's when we lose ourselves in stress. We lose ourselves in fear. We lose ourselves in these false identities. There's a beautiful, beautiful saying in the scriptures that just says, Man eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo. And it means the mind is the answer. The mind is the master key, as Puja Swamiji would say, to both your bondage and your freedom. Another way that I like to think about it is the mind is the steering wheel of the vehicles of our life. It's the steering wheel. Could you imagine buying a car that didn't have a steering wheel? The guy selling it to you says, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's gold covered and it's, got diamonds all over. It's the most expensive one on the lot. Oh, and by the way, there's no steering wheel. Well, we'd never buy it. Because we know no matter how beautiful it is, that's irrelevant. I need it to go where I want it to go. I'm not prepared to just be at the mercy of a machine. A machine. That's all it is. It's been programmed. The newer models are more computerized, older models less computerized, but they're all programmed in some way to go and stop and turn and do their thing. But we don't want to be at the mercy of that. We need a steering wheel. We're not going to just let the car take us where it wants to go. And in the same way, we really need to bring our minds out of that darkness of ignorance. that darkness of this false identification, and get our minds back in the light as tools in our hands, able to take us. Because everything is about choices. And only the mind can make choices, right? We've got that entire life choice of, are we walking the path of Shreyas, the path of Preyas, right? From the Upanishads, the path of righteousness, purity, goodness, or the path of just decadence and hedonism. Well, that's only possible to make a decision when my mind is a tool in my hands, not when I'm a slave in my mind's hands. And so at this time of Guru Purnima, as we celebrate light, and as we celebrate that light of our capital S selves, let us peel back layers of darkness, layers of ignorance. And so over the next few days, that's what we're going to do. Perfect timing. So you'll see on your schedule that the different sessions are dedicated to different aspects of things that pollute our minds, keep them in darkness, negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative beliefs, negative thought patterns, false identifications, distractions, all of this that keeps us from knowing who we are. So we'll peel them back, layer by layer. And as the beautiful full moon of the Guru begins to rise, Puja Swamiji will join us and be with us on Tuesday. He was supposed to be coming in tomorrow, but he got word that the new president of India, who you'll be very, very glad to know is not only a woman, but a tribal woman. For the very, very first time, they're bringing in someone from the tribal communities and a woman, the second woman ever who's been president of India. They're still 2 times ahead of America, but she's coming to Uttarakhand tomorrow. And the chief minister of our state has told Puja Swamiji that he would like Puja Swamiji to welcome the president with him. So Puja Swamiji and our chief minister will be welcoming the new president of India to Uttarakhand, which is just such a beautiful, this is who he is. I was saying to Rekha ji earlier today, I said, well, this is part of the package deal of having a guru who is someone who the heads of the state want to be the one welcoming the president, who is the one there with the president. The current, but soon-to-be former president was with us at the ashram for 2 days in November. And when he was there, he said, this is fulfilling a lifetime dream of mine, to be here on the banks of Ganga doing the arati. So part of the package deal of having a guru as not just enlightened and awakened and divine spiritually, but actually living that every minute, every moment in the world, really bringing that power of spirit, of divinity into service in the world. Well, part of the package deal of that is sometimes we have to share him with the president of the country. So we're gonna do that for a day. she can have him tomorrow morning, and then he's gonna get on a plane to America tomorrow night and will be with us on Tuesday, just as the full moon begins to rise. Puja Swamiji will come and be with us. And just a couple of logistic, pragmatic things before we conclude. We had a beautiful walk this evening. We'll be having walks in the morning at 8. The walk this evening was not silent. It was wonderful. It was beautiful to talk to each other. There is a beautiful power of walking in silence, and I think that we should do that. So from tomorrow, our walks will be in silence. If for any reason there is something important to communicate in terms of a path or something, whatever it may be, just whisper in as few words as necessary. But let's really try to keep our minds chanting as we walk. We've built plenty of free time into the schedule. You'll have lots of time to sit and to chat and to be with each other. But as we walk in Mother Nature, as our feet are on the soil and we're in the trees, just allow yourself to really, to just chant. And whether it's a mantra, whether it's a name of God, whether it's Om, whether it's just your breath, whatever it may be. A beautiful one, if you don't have something that you like to chant, is just Om Brahm, Om Brahm, Om Brahm. Just with each walk, each foot, Om Brahm, Om Brahm. Just this sacred universe, this sacred one universe of which we are not separate. The other logistic piece is that we have special yoga and sound bath programs. And so if Michaela and Soumya will stand, Michaela and Soumya will be leading our morning yoga programs, and Michaela's come in from Mexico to be with us. She's a beautiful, beautiful part of our Parmarth Parivar, who's been with us in Rishikesh for most of you who don't know her, and she's a yoga teacher as well. And Soumya, most of you know, we've had the beautiful joy of being with her without knowing that she had all of these wonderful skills for the last few years. So they will be teaching the morning yoga classes, and the evenings are early so that everybody can get to sleep early and get up for yoga. It's at 6:30 in the morning. Yes, Achal bhai.
There was a question.
Sure.
Where will be the yoga?
Here.
It will be here.
Wonderful. So the yoga will be here, and that's from 6:30 to 7:30, and then we have our walk from 8 to 9. And also in the satsangs after this evening, starting from tomorrow, we'll be taking questions as well. And I think what would be wonderful is, I'm certainly always happy, as you know, to take questions that arise in the moment when people just raise their hand. But I think it would also be good for people who are walking around with questions that are in your mind, in your heart, that you feel are holding you back in some way, or maybe you felt like, oh, I really want to make sure I get this answered at the retreat. If there's some way to get like a bowl, yeah, and maybe we could just keep the bowl here. This room is ours for the whole time, yeah? So we'll just keep the bowl here at the foot of the stage, and then just feel free to write your question on a piece of paper and put them into the bowl, and we'll take as many as we can in each session. Wonderful. So have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, and a beautiful night in this gorgeous, gorgeous retreat center. I hope you all saw the moon with the pink clouds over the lake as we were walking into satsang, as I said to Michaela, I said, it's amazing that anybody could imagine God doesn't exist. I mean, could you imagine looking at a painting and saying the painter doesn't exist? And yet here, people look at this extraordinary creation and say the creator doesn't exist. And it's just as bewildering to me as the idea that you could walk into a museum and look at a painting and say, yeah, I don't think that guy ever existed. I don't think he ever really lived. Well, obviously, if he didn't live, how did the painting arise? So as you're here, another beautiful piece is just, I mean, God is everywhere, of course, but personally I find myself so much more in awe in nature. So allow yourself to just look at the lake, look at the trees, look at the stars when you go out, watch the moon, watch the clouds, and just be in awe of this extraordinary perfection of the Creator.